Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know the politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions about politics, and you don't got to worry about getting judged or roasted or any debates or anything of that nature. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. So, any questions that you might have about politics, just throw them in the chat and we will get to answering them. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. We do not judge here. We don't fight. We don't roast. We don't harass. We don't bully, and we don't do debates. So if you're looking for one of those shows where a Democrat yells at a Republican or vice versa, and they call each other names, this is not the show for that. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions about politics. So, any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and we will get to answering them. No such thing as a dumb question. It could be as simple or as complicated as you like. Oscar says, "What do you think about the French Nazi that recently got killed in France?" I haven't heard anything about that. So yeah, I can't really speak on it. But yeah, I don't think that anybody should get murdered. But if there's a Nazi in France, maybe they could be thrown in jail or something. I don't know what their rules are about being a Nazi in France. All right, excellent first question, Oscar. Thanks so much for being here. What's up, Triska? What's up, Muzz King? Great to see you guys. What's up, Ecuadorian? Thank you for being here. So yeah, any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and we'll get to answering them. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So Ray Cantu says, Israel root of all world's problems. No, that is inaccurate, Ray. I would say that billionaires are the root of all the world's problems, but no, it's pretty inaccurate to say that Israel is the root of all the world's problems. Alrighty, because also, what about all the problems that existed before Israel existed? You know, Ray, this is your final warning. Say some more stuff like that, and I'm gonna block you. Muzz King Triska, thanks so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. Some dude says, "Do you think Pam Bondi has much time left in this administration?" I don't know um, if Trump is at all interested in firing people in his administration without severe political pressure from us, the individuals. Like, all he wants is to see people yelling and screaming at Democrats in those hearings. And that's what she did. Like, she acted like a psychopath. She didn't answer questions. She only was like casting aspersions and talk about how great the Dow was. And according to Trump, that's doing a great job. So I have no idea. You know, it's impossible to predict Trump because he's a psychopath who has the memory of a goldfish. Ray says USS Liberty. I don't know what that is. User 71 says the development of the industrial proletariat is conditioned by what other development? I don't know. Dom says, how do you feel about Israel? I'm fine with Israel, the country. I just don't think the government of Israel is good because they're guilty of war crimes and they're doing a genocide. The Mildew says, how much do you think media bias plays a role in today's politics? I think that it is a massive role in today's politics. Congratulations, Ray. You are out of here. Let's see here. Rick Brunetti says, once Trump is gone, can we remove his name off the buildings he's put it on? Absolutely, we can. Triska says, do you think the SAVE Act will pass the Senate? I would be very shocked and surprised if the Senate was able to pass the SAVE Act. Not only are there Republicans in the Senate who do not want to pass the SAVE Act, but also it's, you know, they would need to get past the Democratic filibuster, and I believe that there are way more Republicans who don't want to get rid of the filibuster to pass the SAVE Act than there are Republicans who want to pass the SAVE Act. So, alrighty. Lightning Queen says, ELEC is the ticker symbol. That's not a question about politics. Seems like you're hyping up your fucking crypto coin or some shit. Daniel D says, when are out Doge checks or Social Security fraud funds going to be sent to us? And then the laughing emoji because you know the answer is never. DJ Hunt says, are you a Democrat or Republican? I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive Democrat. Not a dog in a suit says, how do you feel about France's many overseas territories? I don't really have strong opinions about any residual French territories, like there or some shit like that. It's not really my area of expertise. Nick says America first show is weeknights on Rumble. All right, well that's not a question. Don't come on my show and just hype up other live streams, guys. Mrs. Peculiar says, how do you feel about AIPAC? I'm against them. The same way that I'm against every lobbying organization, There's a hyper focus on AIPAC that I think is a little bit rooted in anti-Semitism. But yeah, Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, like they're all toxic for our government and for our culture. Oscar says, do you believe Lenin was a femboy? I have no opinion about that. DJ Hunt says, what are some things you think are good that Trump is doing? I don't really care for finding the tiny little bit of silver lining in the monstrous shit that Trump is doing. Like, if I agree with him that getting rid of the penny is a good thing, does that excuse the fact that ICE has been murdering people, and has ignored more judicial orders just in this year than every other government agency has in the history of their existence? It's kind of like saying, that dude that stabbed you in the throat, didn't you think he had nice eyes? It seems kind of nonsense to me. Not a dog in a suit says, are you pro-colonialism or anti? I suppose I'm anti. Gray says, where do you lean politically? I'm a progressive Democrat. Guillermo says, why do you think the Republicans are hesitant on releasing the Epstein files? I think it's because Donald Trump and a bunch of his billionaire buddies are implicated in the Epstein files. Tippy Canoe says, do you support the standing filibuster? I mean, I would just rather get rid of the filibuster entirely, but if you're gonna keep the filibuster, at least bring back the talking filibuster. At least make people stand on their feet. At least let's do something where people can see what's happening, and we can bring focus to certain issues, or we can say, if it's a thing that we don't want them filibustering, we can be like, look, this is the guy that is keeping this bill from passing. Oh, okay. Greg says, my brother, dude, hi, I'm a progressive Democrat too. All right, well, welcome to the party, buddy. JP, great to see you again. John Abbott says, if the SAVE Act passed, lawsuits would prevent it from going into effect until after the midterms, and the GOP senators are smart enough to know they can't risk ending the filibuster right before losing the majorities to the Democrats. Oh, yeah, that all tracks to me, John Abbott. Tyler Durden says, LOL, I love when I can tell someone's hands have never had a single callus on them. I mean, I waited tables for 12 years. I don't know if you want to count that as work. Sudoku says, what is the process once someone is found to perjure on the stand? I mean, I think it's different when it's during a congressional hearing than when it's just during a regular trial. I believe, yeah, honestly, I'm trying to figure out from what I know about the way the government works, but I couldn't tell you. There's probably like a Senate parliamentarian or something that would be in charge of that or something. I don't know. I can ask about that though. If you send me a DM, it will remind me to give that a Google. I'll look it up for you. Ivan Cisco, great to see you again. Says, did you hear that Pam Bondi is refusing to release additional files? Can she be arrested? Arrested at this time, probably not. So long as the Department of Justice is still under the purview of the Republican Party and the FBI is still under the purview of Kash Patel, I think it's unlikely, but possible. Yeah. Will the U.S. Marshals arrest the Attorney General? That's a great question. Phantom says, where do you stand politically? I'm a progressive Democrat. Kenny says, should we just publicly hang the co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, I don't condone the death penalty, but we should definitely hold them accountable. That's for sure. Caleb says, what is your political take on Israel? I am for the people of Israel. I'm against the government of Israel. Some dude says, if we get a Democratic president, do you think we should get rid of the filibuster or pack the courts? I think we should do both of those things. Jackson says, are you on the left or right side? I am on the left side. Ecuadorian says, I took a break, like you said I should, and I am ready to get back in the fight for democracy. I went and spoke to people from my community, and we talked about how we can help be a part of the change, from Republicans to Democrats, to help make change for the best. I love to hear that, Ecuadorian. Really, really glad to hear that. Waco Mine says, they be rounding up immigrants without due process, but not going after the known people in the Epstein files. Weird. Does it have anything to do with the climate being out of sync? I don't know what you mean by climate, but it is 100% the fact that the people in governments don't want certain people held accountable for their crimes, be it Trump or people in his orbit or just friends of his. So they are assisting in a massive government cover-up of the most famous and potential child sex trafficking ring in American history. Kenny says, what punishment befits those who eat and defile children? I mean, again, I don't condone the death penalty, so I would say life in prison. Sir Primacy says, the fact that people still believe in left and right baffles me. I mean, there's a difference between left and right, Sir Primacy. Would you like me to explain the differences to you? BE says, are you for ICE? No. Some dude says, do you think we'll see bigger protests during the summer? Potentially. I don't know. Timothy says, it's a global event. I don't know what that's in reference to. Marcia Brady says, white me voting Democrat is like roaches voting for Raid. The Democratic Party is not against white people. What a weird thing to say. Chili Dip just put Trump a couple of times, so that's a block. Scrolling down to the bottom. Sir Premises, I'm good. I prefer to keep my brain cells. That's not a productive comment, so you are being blocked. Congratulations. Skyrus Tuss says, you don't believe in the death penalty, but the little kids died. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you should kill kids. But I also don't think you should kill the people that kill kids. I'm against the death penalty. I'm not for any kind of violence. So, you know, I understand that these crimes are heinous and awful, but I'm not going to make any exceptions for my no death penalty positions. For you, TB Free says, please block me. It will save me from blocking you. No. Kenny says, no hate to you, by the way. I'm sure the question comes off charged. Apologies, by the way. What was your question, Kenny? I don't even see. Oh, yeah, I answered that one already. Andrew says, someone hurt him, so he is taking it on his commentators. No, I'm not. Jade Scene says, I don't think people need to die. Yeah, I agree with that. Boostolks says, thoughts on Iran. Iran is a repressive regime, so I believe that we should be supporting the protesters as much as we can. It is difficult because we don't 100% know what's going on in there because they don't have the government cut off access to the internet, so it's very difficult reporting on what's actually happening. So we don't know what the actual death count is of the government murdering the protesters. But I do believe that America should be, you know, it's a delicate march, it's a delicate dance to try to be like, we're going to assist the protesters, but if we do too much, then we ruin the message of the protest because then they just get that sort of like, then they get accused of just being paid agitators by America. Right. Squirt emoji says, capitalism or socialism? Why not both? Thor says, no, Mossad cut off access to the internet. That seems like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, so I'm going to ask you to stop that or I'm going to block you. Flunk says, what do you think about COSA, about that COSA thing? I don't know what that is. Skyrus Tuss says, what's your thoughts on Biden's having a body double in the Epstein files? That seems like a conspiracy theory, Skyrus. Cameron Hodge, happy President's Day to you too. We stand with Israel. That's not a productive comment, so you are out of here. George Saint says, do you believe we should give our money and political capital to Israel? I don't. I'm not against foreign aid, but the government of Israel is guilty of war crimes and genocide, and we already have a rule in our books that says that we are not allowed to send money and weapons to countries that are guilty of war crimes and genocide. F1 says, who do you support? Democrats up and down the ballot. Arthur says, what would happen to my McChicken if Kamala won? It would taste even better. Jade Scene says, COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act designed to make everyone have to give up their IDs to websites. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a complicated issue because it is a good thing to try to keep children from harmful material on the internet, but the Kids Online Safety Act does not seem like it is going to do that. It seems like it is kind of designed to be a violation of our privacy, of our, you know, rights to privacy. So I think that something should be done. I just don't think that it should be that thing. Kags, please stop spamming the comments. I'm a progressive Democrat. Freeps says, save free Palestine. Okay, I just did. Ask Lee says, how can we get Trump out of our White House? Well, you know, we have to make sure that we vote. We have to make sure that we organize and protest and strike and put political pressure on our elected representatives and business leaders and companies. We need to get more people voting for Democrats. If we vote for more Democrats, then we can start seeing accountability for all of these people and their crimes, and we can start to undo the damage of the Trump administration. Okay, oh, I forgot what your name is. It's Kenna. It's Kenna. I remember Kenna. You see how my little device worked, Kenna? Okay, thoughts on the Michael Jackson theory via Epstein's Island? I don't know what that is. Carlos Perez says, we need a supermajority. I think we need full control of the government, you know? Adams Garden, I did not see your comment. Joshua Coulter says, does the Epstein cover-up show our democracy is dying? No, I think that it shows tentacles firmly rooted in our government, but, it's not dying in a way where we can't save it. Adams Garden says, but Scott Besson said the U.S. artificially created hardship on Iranians. I suppose an argument could be made that the sanctions that we put on Iran to punish the government actually hurts the Iranian citizens. So I'm not gonna argue that it didn't happen in the past, but I don't know how good of an argument that is coming out of the Trump administration when they are the ones who got rid of the Iran nuclear deal, which was like, that was the way that we were going to help the Iranian citizens, and Trump was just like, fuck it. Okay, Waco says, do you think politics is addictive? I think that it's addictive in the way that social media can be addictive, like getting into fights with strangers is a little bit of addictive. Getting likes on your posts about how much you hate ICE can be addictive. But yeah, I think that there are people who get involved in politics because they want to help, and they see things that are wrong that they want to be involved in, and they see people having beliefs that are unproductive, and so they want to be out there. And I think it's a little reductive and potentially an ad hominem attack to suggest that they are doing this because they are addicted to the rush of paying attention to politics. Okay, Wacko, I'll get to the rest of your comments in just a second. Greg says, how do you feel about the 13 to 15-year-olds' testimony being credible coming out against Trump? I think that we really need to be careful about what things look like versus what we can prove. You remember from Training Day, Denzel Washington said, it's not about what you know, it's what about you can prove. It's about what you can prove. And so while there are so many things about Trump as an individual and the way that he has lived his life and the things that he says and does and all the information that we have about him and Epstein and all the stuff that's coming out in the files that really makes it look like he was involved in some shady shit, we just don't know anything to be certain yet. You can personally be confident that things are that way without going out there and saying, I know for 100% certainty that this is the case. I'm confident that shit is accurate. Carrie Durgan says, wait, Democrats actually believe in proof? I don't believe it. That's a really weird thing to say, Carrie. I don't really know what your vibe is. Keep on living for life says, how did we allow Israel so deep into American politics other than money? I think that some of it was political expediency, where Republicans, they would prefer to have a launch pad to sort of like be able to land their planes and their aircraft carriers in the Middle East, and Israel is a good place for that. And so Israel then has leverage over Americans, particularly right-wing politicians in America, in saying that we have this aligned goal of eliminating all the brown people that live around Israel, so maybe we can all work together here. I Bled Red says, humans used to hunt for food, and if I don't pay that one country, I go to jail. Not really sure what you mean by that. Some dude says, who do you see as a possible front-runner for the Democrats? I have no idea. I like Chris Murphy, but, I've been wrong. Who is America going to vote for? I have no idea. Yeah, let's see here. What else was I going to say? But let's remember that the midterm elections are coming up and that the midterms are where we need to be putting all of our focus. Wacko Mind says, when will the general public be more adequately represented in government? When we can get Democrats in there to fix some of our electoral systems and campaign finance and, make it so that more people are voting, stuff like that. Cameron Style says, will we get our first real independent with traction in 2028? We're not going to have an independent candidate with any traction until we get ranked choice voting. And Republicans are currently in charge of the government, so we're not going to have ranked choice voting by 2028. All right, Tony says, liberals support all of the same atrocities that Republicans do. That is not accurate at all. Tony, Matt says, it's funny how we swore never again after World War II, and now we are doing Gaza and American immigrants. I swore, and I also did not vote for the people who are doing this. So, Lennon Fonseca says, who do you think was the last Democrat and Republican president? What a weird question. Did you mean like the last great Democrat and great Republican presidents? So let me know about that. Jack says, thoughts on ICE? I'm against them. Tony Tortolini says, that is accurate. Resume change for government destabilization, war, genocides. No, inaccurate, Tony. There are people who are dead today because Republicans are in charge that would not be dead if Democrats were in charge. So you can miss me with that both sides nonsense. User a whole bunch of numbers says, do you think Harris was a better choice than Trump? Without question. Blues Deluxe says, thoughts on classical liberals, libertarians, or general constitutionalists? I mean, that's it's a pretty big question, Blues. Let me catch up on some other comments before I get to that one. Faded Frequency says, how you doing, my boy? I don't think I count as a goy because my dad was Jewish. User a bunch of numbers says, do you think Biden was a good president? I think that Biden was a good president in that we can look at the things that his administration did, and they were good, like the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, bipartisan gun safety legislation, walking the picket line, supporting unions, trying to break up monopolies, lowering healthcare costs. Like, those were all good things. But there is some question as to how much of that he was responsible for, because he was an extremely old man who was in mental and physical decline during his entire presidency. So whoever was really making those decisions, if it wasn't Joe Biden, did an amazing job. All right, Muzz King, Triska, Ask Lee, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. Let's see here. Miss O says, it's not the what, it's the how. I don't really know what that's in reference to. Bud Banny says, Inflation Explosion Act. Oh, man. How long does it take you to come up with that one? Faded Frequency says, are you a Zionist? I mean, it depends on how you define Zionist. If you think that a Zionist means that Israel is allowed to do genocides on their neighbors, then no, I'm not a Zionist. But if you think a Zionist is just somebody that believes that the people who are currently living in Israel, who are perfectly nice people who just want to live their fucking lives and who are not kicking Palestinians out of their homes and murdering them, then no, I am not. Then I am a Zionist, because I don't think that we should just... I think it is exactly as wrong to take innocent civilians out of Israel as it is to take innocent Palestinians out of Palestine. Aubrey says, how do you feel about the March 7th strike being organized? I am pro-strikes, so I say fucking go for it. Some dude 381 says, if you had a magic wand to change one thing about modern politics, what would it be? Probably money out. I'd probably get the money out of politics. Tamara Hoffman says, I'm ready to listen. I do not identify as Democrat or Republican. Welcome, Tamara. Tamara, is there an issue that is number one on your list, something that's really important to you? Let's see here. Wacko Mind says, the USA did some war crimes and genocide in the past. Should there be funding withheld from them? I mean, I don't think that we can withhold our own money and our own weapons from ourselves because of the war crimes and genocide that we did in the past. But I take your point there, Wacko Minds. Brando says, thoughts on Marjorie Taylor Greene? I don't trust her at all. I'm glad that she's out there saying the right thing now, but she's done a lot of damage. I'm pretty sure that her fucking tweets saying that Jews have a secret space laser is still up. So yeah, if she really wants to do the work to undo the damage that she herself did, I'm down for that, but she's not even close to that yet. Thomas says, are you MAGA? No. Somebody, it looks like a snowflake emoji, says, what do you think about the continuous genocide going on in the Gaza Strip? I'm against it. Tamara Hoffman says, something important to me would be gardening laws. Well, I mean, then you should be a Democrat because Republicans are hostile to gardening laws. Aubrey says, love to hear it. Please, your page to bring as much awareness as possible. We need everyone to strike. Absolutely, Aubrey. You will never hear me not hyping up general strikes and protests and shit like that. Adams Garden says, do you think Venezuela's new president will work with Trump? I think she already is. I think the reason why she has not been kidnapped as well is because she is agreeing to work with Trump and she's letting Trump steal their oil and shit like that. Alrighty. JP says, to be frank, it was Marsha Brady complaining about fake things, typical for her. That's very funny. That, I believe, was in reference to Pam Bondi. Okay, let's see here. BTS says, both parties have been talking about helping the middle class for the last 40 years, and it gets worse. That is inaccurate, BTS. The Democratic Party actually has helped the middle class. If you would like some examples, I'm happy to give them. Daniel Miller says, correction, take what's owed to us, not stealing. Daniel, I'm going to give you one opportunity to be better in this live stream going forward. But no, we do not own the oil that is in other countries. Tamara Hoffman says, where do you get your information? I mean, I read the news from a bunch of different sources to try to avoid any kind of media bias. Smaller, tighter financially, further the middle class, please. BTS, you understand that Republicans have been in charge many times and that they undo the progress that the Democrats do. And that is the reason why the middle class keeps getting smaller and smaller, right? Are you here to engage or are you here to fight? BTS, let me know. Faded Frequency says, how do you feel about those finding sanctuary in Israel, or do you mean funding sanctuary in Israel? Let me know, Faded Frequency. Lona says, what's your favorite food? Ooh, Italian. Kirby says, peaceful protest does more or less nothing. Completely inaccurate, Kirby. Check out a political scientist named Erica Chenoweth. She has crunched the numbers, and she has found that peaceful protests are way more productive and have a way better success rate than violent protest movements. I do not condone any kind of violence. I condemn it in the strongest possible language, Kirby. So please do not say that shit on my live stream going forward. Faded Frequency says, what is your opinion on the effect of the Clarity Act? I don't know what the Clarity Act is. Daniel Miller says, how do you feel about sanctuary cities in America? I'm for them. User a bunch of numbers says, fire Congress, start over. That's what the primaries and the elections are for. Spun Bearing says, why don't we talk about businesses that don't get prosecuted for hiring undocumented people? Yeah, why are we punishing the undocumented workers and not the owners of the companies that illegally hired them? I believe that we need to start seeing accountability from the top down. You know, like, let's go after the fucking billionaires. Let's go after the fucking business leaders, you know? All right, Daniel Miller says, gross, tells me everything I need to know. I would love to know what comment I said that made you think that. Lauren, great to see you again. Scotty Barrett says, normalizing political violence on any side is evil. Completely agree with that. JV1 says, how about the Save Act attack on women voting? I'm against it. Faded Frequency says, those somehow skipping prosecution fleeing to Israel. I guess I'm not for that, but I'm not really sure what specifically you're referring to. Some dude says, how long you think it'll take to repair international relationships after this regime? I mean, it just depends on how many Democrats we have in office and exactly what kind of Democrat we have in the White House. But yeah, it is very, very necessary for us to begin those relationships. And it is also very necessary for us to ignore the narrative of the quote-unquote apology tour that the right is going to cast on whatever Democratic president we have. But yeah, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of relationships to fix. We have a lot of treaties we need to re-sign. Yeah, it's a fucking nightmare. CS says, can you name one civil rights or progress that was made without protests? I can't. Completely agree with that. Bobby Joe says, are you just fighting for people to be with your favorite color? No, I am not. I am fighting for people to have better lives and a better government and a better country. Let's see here. Blues Deluxe says, thoughts about short barrel rifles getting deregulated. They were restricted for a dumb reason. You know, I know that there are some gun control laws that have been passed not because they would be the most effective, but because they are what could get passed. And so, you know, I don't know how counterproductive it is to do that so much as it is just not productive enough. And I mean, I'm open to arguments that it's counterproductive, but I just don't see it. And so I'm going to champion any kind of gun control legislation, even if it isn't perfect. Faded Frequency says, what's your opinion on the tokenization of RWA? Don't know what that is. Zona says, do you play any video games? And if so, what was your favorite one? My favorite video game is the XCOM series. Scotty Barrett says, why are you against the SAVE Act? The SAVE Act is a massive voter suppression bill, which is the reason why I am against it. Spun Bearing says, how do we combat cognitive dissonance in our MAGA friends? If you're interested in doing that, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of energy. But if you really want to do that, I would recommend checking out a book called The Persuaders by Anand Giridharadas. What's up, Allie? I see you. So sorry. I've just got a ton of comments today that I'm getting through. So yeah, check out The Persuaders by Anand Giridharadas. I have a link in my Discord, which is on my bio, if you want to check that out. But yeah, short version is, it takes a lot of patience. You have to ask a lot of questions. You got to meet them where they are. You got to do more listening than talking. Find your shared reality. Find the things you can agree on and build from there. And don't get frustrated if they are not ready to vote for Kamala Harris after one session. You know, it takes a while. Okay, Mr. B says, so you think poor people aren't smart enough to get an ID? No, I think that poor people might be too poor to get an ID because IDs are not free. Alrighty, let's see here. Yeah, Allie says, "Are you worried about the integrity of the midterms?" I am worried about the integrity of the midterms, Allie, and that is why I think that everybody should be on the phone with their state and local representatives, asking them, "Do we have contingency plans for all the various ways that Trump and the Republican Party could try to steal the midterm elections? You know, do we have a plan for the FBI potentially seizing voting machines? Do we have a plan for ICE trying to block roads leading into Democratic poll areas? You know, are we protecting our citizens? Are we protecting our voter rolls? Because they can potentially use that as a to arrest list." Shushy Your Mouth Boy says, "Do you think World War III will start?" I do not. Rab says, "Are you left or right?" I am left. Mr. B says, "You do realize you need an ID for everything already, LOL. No, you don't, Mr. B. So that's a fake thing you just said, Mr. B. Right. General Walkie says, "Will Mossad free Iran?" I don't know. AM Fun says, "IDs are free in states with laws that give IDs to poor people for free or reduced cost." Well, they are not free everywhere, AM, and this is I don't know if that's actually a thing, what you just said. So I don't think that what you said was 100% accurate, and even if it is accurate, it's not accurate for the entire country. Scotty Barrett says, "With plenty of elections and time between elections, if people want to vote, it's impossible to get them." I don't know. Is that what you meant to say, Scotty? Are you trying to make the anti-Save Act argument? Because I thought you were pro-Save Act. Mr. B says, "You even need ID for welfare and SNAP and Medicaid." All right, Mr. B. Again, not everybody has an ID. Some people can't afford it. Sometimes Republicans will make it harder to get IDs in states that have voter ID laws. Like they will shut down DMVs in Democratic areas so that it's harder for them to get them. Let's see here. Scotty Barrett says, "Pro-save, but not unwilling to hear the other side." So you do think that it is difficult to get the necessary documentation for people to vote if the SAVE Act passes. CS says, "What do you need to register to vote?" You just have to register. I think you just need to have an address, and then I haven't registered in a while, so and I usually, and sometimes I'll do it when I renew my driver's license. So yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure you just need to have a social security number, and then you can vote. Willie Muzzking, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day, and all the regulars know that means it is finger hearts o'clock, the best time of the day. Alrighty. Hikaru says, "Opinions on communism." If communism is workers owning the means of production, then I'm for it. If communism is the government making private ownership of anything illegal, that seems a little bit more drastic than I'm willing to go for in the year of our Lord 2026. Okay, Adolf Honkler says, "Is Donald Trump better at eating diapers than Kamala Harris?" What a weird question. All right, Anonymous Archangel says, "He wouldn't answer my question, keep skipping it on purpose. That is inaccurate. I did not see it." Scotty says, "I think not enforcing some kind of necessary proof for being a citizen makes us lean too far the other way for letting just anybody vote." So Scotty, there is no rampant voter fraud, though. Like, if it was as easy to do voter fraud as Republicans make it seem like, then, we would see it. There would be some evidence of it. But they did a 20-year study in Texas looking for voter fraud. They found 10 specific instances of voter fraud. Not like 10 times when lots of people did it. 10 individual cases of voter fraud. It is not a problem that needs solving. My guy. Anonymous Archangel says, "Why does every country on earth have borders and immigration laws?" I guess because countries respect their own sovereignty. Gen X 1973 says, "Who did the study?" Who did what study? Bitnevo says, "Do you think California will get as much snow as Marco Rubio's right nostril this year?" Impossible, especially with climate change. We're just seeing less. We're just seeing a lot less snow everywhere. Anonymous Archangel Michael says, "Wrong." All right, Anonymous, why do you think? Gen X 1973 says, "The no voter fraud study." I don't have that memorized, Gen X, but if you send me a DM, I will send it to you. Scotty Barrett says, "I don't think it's that easy, but I appreciate the sentiment of the conversation." Well, I appreciate you, Scotty. You seem dope as hell. Colin says, when does human life begin? I believe it is the moment when the fetus can exist outside of the pregnant woman, the moment of viability, and that is when, in every state of the union, it is impossible to get an abortion after that point. Yeah, from you're fucking preaching the truth there, sister. Okay, let's see here. Scotty Barrett says, fair, but what about the act signed in Minnesota where we don't need documents to get a license? I don't know anything about that law. I don't know if it's a real thing, Scotty. Alrighty. Rose Revolution says, what do you think about the current decline in births in Europe? What is to be done about it? You know, it's interesting. If you ask people to explain why birth rates are currently in decline, they will most universally tell you that it is because all of our lives are so fucking hard these days. We're all worried about an oncoming climate apocalypse. Cost of living is continuing to spiral out of control. The rich keep getting richer. The poor keep getting poorer. There's violence and international tensions and stuff. And so people don't feel confident growing a family anymore. There is some evidence to suggest that quality of life is not the sole dictator of when and if people decide to have children, and it does not correlate necessarily to birth rates. So I would just say I believe it is intimately involved to the late stage capitalism nightmare that we are currently all suffering under, but data scientists will tell you that it's probably more complicated than that. Driscoll Willie Muzking, thank you so much for helping me reach my first Finger Hearts goal of the day. We are really cooking, y'all. We are really cooking. Brian says, tax the people, pay for immigrants. No, tax the billionaires, Brian. Tax the billionaires. Pay for everybody else. Ghostface says, do you think ICE can be any good to us? Not in its current form. Adam's Garden says, they are not counting the birth rates of immigrants. I don't know where that comment is coming from, Adam. Jose Manuel says, what a mess with the Epstein files. The DOJ won't release all of them. Conspiracy, 100%. We are watching the government do a cover-up. We are watching them cover up the largest, most awful and inhumane child sex trafficking ring in American history, and the president is directly implicated in it. Dianus, great to see you again. Randy Barbers' opinion of Trump-reversal of pollution laws. You know, I would think that everybody on the planet, whether you are Republican or Democrat, left or right or whatever, would understand that it is bad for your children to be eating food that is laced with toxic pollutants and drink water that has toxic pollutants and breathe air that has toxic pollutants. And so, you know, I would encourage everybody to talk to their right-leaning friends about how much chemical runoff sludge is going to be in our air and food and water because the Trump administration basically shut down the Environmental Protection Agency for no fucking reason. Anything Debating says AOC 2028 thoughts. I like AOC a lot. I think she would be great. I don't know if it's her time. I don't know if she wants to yet. If she wants to run for Senate instead, I don't know. All right, Camp Bella Fabrications says, what is your take on the age of elected officials being a factor in their likelihood to experience the results of their governments and whether that would affect how they govern? I am with you on this line of thinking. We should probably have an upper age limit for our politicians, maybe 75, maybe 70, something like that, because people should have to buy in to the world that they are creating in their governance. Wabby145 says, if voter ID is required, then we need to make it free. Centers need to be open 24 hours and no further than 30 minutes from most people. Completely fucking agree with that. Wabibi, 100% accurate. Brian72 says, jail Fauci and Bill Gates for crimes against humanity. Brian, I'm going to give you an opportunity to be better, so ask a question or you're going to get booted. Spirit Wind says, do you think Kamala would have released the Epstein files? Yes, 100% Kamala would have released the Epstein files. Spirit Wins. Please take it down a notch. Your right wing is showing, and I don't care for that nonsense on my live stream. You can be right wing, just don't do it like that. All right. Sam Squatch says host is delusional. That's not a productive comment, so you're out of here. Brian72 says, why? You don't like the truth? No, I love the truth. I just hate what you're doing. Matt Dad says, what Labubu do you have? I don't have any Labubus. Anything Debating says, can you convince me to vote for Gavin Newsom? If he's the nominee, I might vote third party. Sure. Gavin Newsom is a Democrat, any Democrat will be better than any Republican because at its core, the Republican Party is just about cutting taxes for the rich. Gavin Newsom's a flawed candidate, but he at least has a foundation of Democratic beliefs that will be better than the foundation of any Republican's beliefs. Adams Garden says, what will happen to Epstein prosecutors once Democrats take over the seat? Accountability, but there will be, let me clarify. There will be a push for accountability. Whether or not they're able to achieve accountability is entirely up to how much work people like you and me do. The problem with Merrick Garland's Department of Justice and trying to get justice for all of the people that attacked our country during the first Trump administration was that we did not give them enough time, we did not give them enough resources, we did not give them enough runway. And so had Trump not won this election, we would have seen more accountability for Trump and the people in his orbits. But the American people decided to throw our fucking country in the gutter and vote for Donald Trump and Republicans instead. Dinah H says, I have a two-part question. First, what's your stance on voter ID? I'm against it because, number one, it's unnecessary, and number two, the Republican Party has been using it as a voter suppression tool. What's part two, Dinah? Adams Garden says, why Epstein is not a red line for Republicans? Because Republicans don't believe in accountability for people that are on their team. Uperlar says, how can one man make a decision on climate change? He has no education in this science. Part of the project of fascist administrations is consolidating power so that they can make unilateral decisions the way that Trump is making unilateral decisions. And so we are watching the outcome of a successful Project 2025, where they outlined exactly who needed to be replaced so that Trump could make these stupid unilateral decisions, so that businesses could continue to pollute us with chemical runoff from their factories, and all of our children are going to be growing up with various rare forms of cancer and shit like that. So there you go, y'all. All right. Diana H says, can you clarify how it's a voter suppression tool? Then I can give you part two. Sure. So the Republican Party has done studies on who does and does not have IDs. And what they have found is that there are way more Democratic voters, people of color, people in the poverty spectrum who do not have IDs. And therefore, it would benefit them as a party to make having an ID necessary to vote, because then Democratic voters would not be able to vote. Additionally, they shut down DMVs in Democratic areas so that even if you do have the money to get an ID, you then have to drive 5 or so hours to the nearest DMV in order to get it. And if you are already poor, then it is very difficult for you to find the time and the money to make that kind of a trip. Democrats are scum says, why couldn't Dems vote? You know, I'm just going to go ahead and block you now. Anything Debating says, okay, I think I will vote for Gavin if he's the nominee, but I still hope he's not. I hope he's not too. But, you know, there are 335 million people in this country, and not everybody agrees with you and me. And so if there are more Democratic voters out there who want Gavin Newsom as opposed to whatever candidate you and I like, then, you know, I think we should be humble enough to recognize that we might not be in the majority in every single issue. All right. A-Train says, you're a racist if you think it's too hard for minorities to get ID, considering it's necessary. No, I'm not. That is not a racist thing to say. It is a statistical fact that if you are looking at groups of people who do not have ID, communities of color, and people who are living below the poverty line tend not to have IDs in larger numbers than other types of citizens. Willie, Triska, Kim Buckman, thank you so much for helping me reach my second finger hearts goal of the day. Alrighty. Gary says incorrect. What did I say? Apple user says, who doesn't have ID? Lots of people. Say says, God, this dude's intelligent. Thank you, Say. Apple user says, if you don't have an ID, we don't want you to vote. I mean, then that's a poll tax. Every human being, every citizen has a right to vote. But if you're saying you need to pay $80 to vote, it's a poll tax, which is illegal. It's unconstitutional. A-Train says, so people don't drive or bank. What a weird thing to say. Brian72 says, yes, it is. You think someone in Atlanta or Chicago or Detroit can't get an ID is racist as hell. No. To everybody calling me racist for saying statistical facts, I will block you if you say it again. Apple user says, if you don't have an ID, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. Go get an ID if you want to vote. I'm just going to start blocking people who aren't asking questions. Everybody's in question jail right now. If you don't ask a question, you're out of here. Irish Page says, how about white Republicans don't vote? I mean, everybody should have the right to vote. Some dude says, do you think MAGA can survive without Trump or just morph into something else? I believe that MAGA is done after Trump. I think that there will be people who try to take over MAGA after that, but it's basically done. Diana says, do you feel it's racist to claim that people of color can't get ID? I think if somebody's saying that it is part of their genetic makeup that brown people cannot get ID, but saying that structural racist systems have made it so that people of color have IDs at lower rates than other communities in America is not a racist thing to say. It is calling out racist structures in America. Okay, Cordy says, can I join? I want to ask you a question. I'm not going to have anybody up right now because we got a lot of questions to answer. Anything Debating says, I'm not convinced that electric cars are better for the environment than gas cars. Thoughts? We are seeing massive declines of smog in heavy car cities like Los Angeles that have been making the transition to electric. So obviously, public transportation is the best for the environment, but switching over from gas cars to electric cars is a move in the right direction. Joey B says, what happens when all the government is in prison for the e-files? Then we vote for new people. Spirit Wind says, did you know Mexican citizens are indeed required to have government-issued photo ID to vote? I don't know if that's true at all. Ton Papa says, why don't USA just assign IDs to everyone? European asking, excellent question, Ton Papa. The reason is because the people who are trying to make voter ID a thing actually don't want people to vote. They want the people who don't have IDs to not be able to vote. And they want women to have a harder time voting than men. And so if they really gave a shit about this, if they really gave a shit about just everybody has an ID so that we know who you are when you go to vote, then they would just give everybody an ID. But instead, they're doing this fucking dance where they make it seem like it was so easy for everybody to get an ID. What's the problem? You work in 3 jobs, you got 5 kids, you're a single parent because the other person in your relationship died or was arrested on spurious charges because fascists are fucking roaming the street right now. So you don't have the time to drive 5 hours away and spend $80 to get an ID. Seems pretty shady to me. Turo says, skip 10 questions. I got 130 people watching. Sometimes your question gets missed. Sorry. Name says, who are the fascists? The people in the Trump administration right now. Konadu says, is socialism ideal? I think that for certain industries, socialism is ideal. I don't know if America is ready, or even if it's a good idea for America to be 100% socialist. Spirit Wind says, that was amusing. I don't know what I did, but, God bless you. Anything Debating says, I also don't like that Gavin is charging people to drive gas cars 20 cents per mile on top of gas. I get it. I don't know the reality of that policy. I worry sometimes about right-wing propaganda saying that things exist that don't exist. I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying that you are perpetuating that. I am saying it's possible that that is a fake thing that you have learned from fake sources, but not intentionally. I don't know if it's a real thing. If it is a real thing, I can see the argument for it. Like, let us financially incentivize people to make the switch to electric cars. We are also suffering through a cost of living crisis right now. So any additional financial burden on people in the middle class or below is unilaterally a bad thing. So, yeah, it's complicated. If that is the case, I'm hoping that there are ways that they are helping out people who cannot afford that shit. Diana H says, how do you reconcile the fact that voter ID is an 84 in favor issue and even higher in Black and Latino communities? I don't know if that is accurate, Diana. John Bradley says, what legislation is needed to reform the EPA outside of partisan politics? That's a really good question, John Bradley. I think it goes back to the Chevron doctrine. If you don't know what the Chevron doctrine is, it's basically a Supreme Court decision that said that experts within government agencies are allowed to make decisions for those agencies. The Supreme Court just overturned it, so now they get to have a say in what agencies actually get to do. I think that decision needs to be reversed. I think that there has to be a mandate in these agencies that they have to do what the point of the agency is. So for both Trump administrations, there have been fossil fuel billionaires in charge of the EPA. So obviously they are not going to be interested in actually protecting the environment. So I think that by, they have to be executing that job in good faith. And it can't just be hoping that the Senate will not confirm somebody that doesn't have that that agency's mandates in mind while they're being confirmed, because we have watched this happen in both of the Trump administrations, that the Republicans would just rubber stamp fucking anybody that Trump wants, regardless of if the person in charge of that agency is antithetical to the mandate of that agency. All right, Adolf allowed to vote. I mean, I would love it. I would love to make it so that Nazis do not have the right to vote. But where any kind of legislation involving who is or is not allowed to vote, you have to be careful about how that's weaponized, because then who gets to decide who is a Nazi and who is not a Nazi? I am sure that the Trump administration would love to label me a Nazi and take away my right to vote. Okay, Ecuadorian says, I am so sick of MAGA. Maybe we should round them all up and ship them to North Korea and Russia and let them handle MAGA. It's funny, Ecuadorian, but let's take the temperature down a little bit. All right, let's see here. Randy Barber says, in my state, all voting is by mail. Voter ID not possible. No ballot boxes. And I'm sure it's great, Randy. Dr. Fruit Snack says, do you see the clip where Trump is scared about the midterms? I mean, I'm not sure what specific clip you were referring to, but yeah, he has been talking about how he's expecting to get shellacked during the midterms. Alrighty, let's see here. Some dude says, do you see a renewable energy or nuclear energy as better investment for the future? I think renewable energy, building new nuclear plants now is not productive because it takes like 10 years for them to get up and running. I know that there is a thing that people are working on, like these little mini nuclear reactors that are much quicker. If we can do that, then fucking do it. But again, I don't really, yeah. I would say the fact is we were printing a nuclear power plant's worth of solar panels every day during the height of the Inflation Reduction Act Biden administration. So I just say, let's fucking go back to doing that, All right. Anything Debating says, do you think Texas will go blue in 2028? I don't make predictions. Anything Debating, and their political predictions are worthless. Let's just do the work to make Texas go blue, whether it's 26, 28, or wherever. Brian72 says, so if he doesn't push people to vote, he doesn't care about the people. If he does, he's scared. I don't know what that means, Brian. Diego Vargas says, do you think in 15 years we'll have a crazy Republican who will make us miss Trump? No, I don't think it's possible. David Douglas says, won't take as long nuclear power plants now that the EPA is gone. That is the scariest fucking thing I've ever heard, David. I can't fucking believe that, man. Oh, man. Boy, oh, boy. Yeah, that's a fucking bummer, man. Dr. Fruit Snack says, you see what RFK Jr. said about the toilet seat? Yeah, that guy's fucking psychotic. Jules says, is food political? I mean, I suppose an argument could be made. Brian72 says, you know what it takes to make solar panels? Yeah. I think the argument you're probably trying to make, Brian, is that we're going to have to use fossil fuels in order to make solar panels, and that's still better, because once the solar panels are made, then they're made. And then that has replaced fossil fuels that then do not have to be used in the future, Brian. So you can miss me with that anti-climate change propaganda. Maxim says, do you think the Magnet Armando is mid because everyone shares your fascist political apologetics? Is this a bit, Maxim Ross? Because seems pretty, it's not a great bit, Brian72 says, nope, then they stop working and have to be replaced. Congratulations, Brian. You have annoyed me to the point where you are no longer here. All right, where are we at? Almost at an hour. Wabibi says, it's not a real thing, but it has been brought up in state legislatures to replace the gas tax. Yes, so whoever was talking about the Governor Newsom 20 extra cents, it is not a real thing. It is not a real thing. It is a proposal, but it has not been voted on. It is not a real thing. It's the Rocketeer. Great to see you again. Let's see here. Susan Garza says, do you think a blue wave is coming? I think that a blue wave is coming, but it is possible that Trump and the Republican parties and the Republican Party will be effective in suppressing the vote or stealing the election in 26 and 28. So we have to do so much work that the elections are too big to rig. And we have to be on the phone with our secretaries of state to make sure that they have contingency plans for all of the malfeasance that the Trump administration might try to do to try to lie cheat, or steal their way into electoral victories in 26 and on from there. Taylor Lee says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who prosecute you. Matthew 5:44. Yeah, I'm all about that kind of Christianity. Sweden says, do you think the Iran revolts will succeed? I don't know. I hope so. Protest movements that are ones that America kind of force onto countries tend to be a lot more substantive and tend to have a higher success rate. So, and the demographic breakdown of everybody that's involved in these protests, it's not just like the cool young people who are living in the city centers. It's everybody, and so that bodes well for the movement in general. All right, Jesus says, do you think Trump will deploy troops in Mexico to combat criminal organizations? I don't know. I wouldn't put it past him. It would be a really bad idea. Nick's Mindful Tip says, do you think it's important to hear out opposing views? I do, but there's a difference between hearing out opposing views and being tolerant of intolerance. So if I have somebody on here who is like, would you allow me up to explain to you why white supremacy is actually a really great political philosophy? I'm just like, no, I don't need to engage in this at all. If somebody is like, hey, that woman, Renee Good, that ICE, that CPB fucking murdered, he was actually justified in that murder. Do you want to hear how? And I'm like, no, I do not, because I've seen the video. I know all the arguments. That's just propaganda and misinformation at that point. Lauren says, did you end the Twitch stream on purpose? I didn't. Is it not streaming there any longer? It should be going. It should be going still. All right, It's the Rocketeer says, went to a stand-up show on Friday, and it got me thinking, how often do stand-ups work jokes in the city they're in, and how often do that joke killed, died in last city get worked in? I think that if you're a road comic, then you tend to have that be part of your repertoire because it gets people kind of like on board with you really quick. Okay, Jago Vargas says, is OPEC an oil mafia? I think an argument could be made. Grace, I really appreciate you in the live stream reminding everybody to vote and hyping everybody up for voting. I'm about that life. Badger75 says, what do you think of the consumer boycott? Could it work? 100%. We just have to have enough people doing it. Anything Debating says, can you give me top 3 reasons why Trump won the election? Misinformation and propaganda, incumbency bias, where people were just mad at whoever was in charge when the prices went up, even if it wasn't their fault, and billionaire campaign finance fraud and violations of campaign finance law. Luke, who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballot. Uncle Hippie says, is it true that OPEC is reducing oil prices to recapture market share? I don't know if that is true. I would need to look into it. Willie says, you also forget to mention Joe Rogan. He asked me for my top 3. I don't believe that the Manosphere podcast universe was one of the top 3, but it might have been. Nash Schmoot says, name why Kamala lost. I already did. Michael Murphy says, yeah, 80 million people are wrong, LMAO, Trump hater. I mean, they voted wrong. They voted wrong. And I'm happy to make that argument. I don't hate anybody, but I'm allowed to say when somebody is a bad president or a good president. Joey, great to see you again, says, did you hear my favorite NFL team owners are in the files? Oh, boy. Sorry, the Jets. Anything Debating says, what do you think the percentage of Trump voters who regret their vote? I think it's probably small, but it definitely exists. I think there's probably a 30% block that is never going to change their mind about Trump, but that leaves 10% of the 40% of the American electorate that tends to vote for him. Alrighty, everybody. We're at about an hour. Freddie says, what do you think about Charlie Kirk? I think it was wrong that he was assassinated, but he was a liar and a con artist. Alrighty. Let's see here, everybody. Oh, sorry that the Twitch stream collects to everybody who's on Twitch. Thank you for being here, everybody. Get your final questions in. I don't know anything about Scottish independence. CS says, do you think the larger portion of regret is from those who did not vote? Potentially, yeah. But I did read that Google searches for, can I change my vote, spiked after Trump won the election. So, those people do exist. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we are all struggling financially, but if you have the will and the desire, then the mechanisms are there for you. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send emotes on Twitch. You can become a super fan on TikTok. You can become a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. Costs you $0, helps me out a ton. You can also be you can also join my Patreon for little as $1 a month. Special thanks to all my regular donators and patrons: Robert, Shannon, Carmine, Patrick, Melissa, the two Seans, Dan Blackroyd, Pliff, Lauren, Triska, and It's the Rocketeer. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If there are any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, in touch. I want you guys to get in touch with me. I want to be a resource for you to be more informed and more involved in politics. So ask me however many questions that you like. Use me and abuse me. Use me until you use me up. DMs are open. You can email me through my website. You can hit me up through my Discord channel. The Discord is also great because there's recommendations there for books and podcasts and great non-violent resistance that you can do. There's suggestions for work for you to do there on the Discord channel, and there's recommendations for organizations that you should be helping with your time and with your money. They desperately need you, so please go and help out those organizations. And just lastly, my heartfelt plea that you all do the work, because the only way that we get out of this is if we all do the work. Anything Debating says, do you think we should try to get an inside man to make Republicans vote third party? I don't know. I don't know how effective that would be. You know, is it a better use of our time to just try to get people to vote for Democrats or try to infect the Republican Party from the inside? I have no idea. Diego Vargas says, why is the Middle East so important and always in conflict and the U.S. is always involved? They have a ton of oil. They have a ton of oil. And so it is a combination of we have destabilized that region on purpose to get the oil, and the fact that that amount of money is an inherently corrupting and cancerous force on both individuals and countries. All right, thank you, Rabab. Some dude says, why are Republicans better at politics and Democrats are better at controlling popular culture? I don't think that is accurate at all. I don't think that Republicans are better at politics, and Democrats don't control popular culture. And in fact, I believe that we have seen the Republican Party trying to take over popular culture, and in some cases being effective. I will point you to the Joe Rogan universe, Andrew Schultz, Theo Vaughn, all coming out and fucking caping for Willie and the Trump and sorry, Willie, I just saw your name. They weren't caping for Willie. They should have been caping for the Republican Party and Donald Trump. KT says, you're answering all the weakest, boring questions. Sorry, KT, you don't have to be here. Diego Vargas says, wasn't Saddam Hussein a U.S. ally during the 80s and we encouraged him to invade Iran? Yeah, that is true, Diego Vargas. Brant Meir says, which state do you think is the best run? I have no idea. It's the Rocketeer says, is this a safe place to say that Lauren Boebert is low-key a baddie? Sure, you know, for a good time, take her to see Beetlejuice the musical. Anything Debating says, did you see the Republicans are trying to copy the Democrats' TikTok? I don't know what that's referring to. I haven't seen anything like that at all. All right, looks like we are looks like we are basically rounding out around the end of things. Scrawny Ronnie says, hey, Jared, been a while to stop by. Great to see you, Scrawny Ronnie. No King's protest on March 28th. Everybody sign up for it. Arlo says, what are your thoughts on Starmer? I don't know a ton about UK politics. I believe that Labour is a better political party than the Tories. And so I believe that we need to give Labour more runway to actually get shit done. The reason why left-leaning parties tend to underperform is because they get attacked from both sides, and there is a lot of money on attacking them and not attacking the more conservative parties. And we have the exact same problem here in America. So we give so much grace to right-wing parties. We let them fuck up everything, and then we punish them that much for it, and then we just vote them back into office again. And Democrats, people on the left, they do incredible things, and then they make tiny problems, and then we don't vote for them for 2 decades because of those tiny problems. So I want to try to change that dynamic. Can we all have a much more realistic and accurate view of the parties? Can we start judging them equally? I would love it if we judge the Republican Party half as hard as we judge the Democratic Party. We never give Democrats any credit. We never give Republicans any blame. We cannot raise the bar high enough for Democrats. We cannot lower it low enough for Republicans. So I believe that this dynamic exists in the UK as well. All right, everybody, I got to get out of here. I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Do the work. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And have a great week, everybody.